Every single day, we're just bombarded with these big economic numbers, right? Inflation's up, unemployment's down. But have you ever really stopped to ask, where do they get these numbers? Well, that's what we're going to do today. We're going to dive in, and believe me, the answer is way more fascinating and honestly, way more complicated than you'd probably guess. So, you see a headline like this. It's just bam, one powerful statistic. And it feels so solid, right? So factual, like someone just went out with a ruler and measured it. It tells this huge story about economic hardship in just a handful of words. But here's the thing, that number didn't just fall out of the sky. It wasn't just sitting there waiting for someone to find it. Right. That's the big question. How do we know? How on earth do you take something as massive and messy and human as unemployment and boil it all down to one single precise number? That's the mystery we're going to unpack. Okay, so to get started, we've got to kind of reset our brains on a really basic idea. What does it actually mean to observe something? Because in economics, and this is wild, just like in something like astrophysics, it's got almost nothing to do with what you can literally see with your own two eyes. And this is where it gets really interesting. Look at this distinction here. For you and me, observable is simple. It's something I can see, I can touch, I can observe the price tag on a gallon of milk. Easy. But you can't see inflation. It's not a thing you can point at. So, for an economist, observable means something totally different. It means you can measure it reliably, using a system even if that system is super complex and built on a mountain of theory. This quote from an astrophysicist just nails it. Think about it. Nobody has ever seen the core of the sun, right? Impossible. But scientists say they observe it. How? By catching these tiny little particles called neutrinos in these gigantic, complicated machines. They're using layers and layers of theory to connect a little blip on a screen to a hard fact about what's happening millions of miles away inside a star. And believe it or not, our big economic numbers, they work in pretty much the exact same way. All right, so let's make this real. Let's take a look at our main case study for this, the Consumer Price Index. You know it as the CPI. It's the number we use to measure inflation. And on the surface, it looks like just one number. But underneath, it's a whole chain of decisions, a bunch of assumptions, and, yeah, even some pretty big value judgments. And look, you might be thinking, okay, CPI, who cares? But this stuff matters a lot. This isn't just some number for academics to argue about. It literally hits your wallet. It's the number that decides cost of living increases for Social Security and pensions. It's what shifts tax brackets around. And it's what the government looks at to make huge policy decisions that affect every single one of us. So getting this number right, whatever that means, has massive real-world consequences. And just to give you an idea of the sheer scale of this thing, check this out. Every single month, the Bureau of Labor Statistics prices 71,000 different goods and services. They have people going into 22,000 stores, surveying 60,000 households. I mean, it is a monumental effort. All of that work just to get to that one little number you see in the news. So, okay, what's the big deal? Why is this so hard? Well, the very first hurdle is a doozy. It's called the index number problem. And it's this fundamental puzzle. How in the world do you track price changes when the stuff people are actually buying is changing constantly? So the classic way to do this is with something called a Lasparius index. The idea is pretty simple, actually. You basically create a shopping basket of goods and services that an average person buys in a starting year, let's say 2020. Then you just keep pricing that exact same basket month after month, year after year. But you can probably see the problem already, right? That fixed basket gets old, fast. If the price of beef shoots through the roof, what do? You buy more chicken. But the fixed basket doesn't see that. It just keeps tracking the expense of beef. So it can end up overstating how much inflation people are actually feeling. Now, there's an alternative called a Pache index that uses the current shopping basket, so it's always fresh. But it's way harder to put together, and it has the opposite problem. It might actually understate inflation. And that right there is the core problem. Which basket do you choose? Last year's or this year's? Do you measure the cost of an old way of life at today's prices or a new way of life at old prices? See, there's no single scientifically correct answer. It's a choice. It's a judgment call, baked right into the foundation of the number itself. Okay, if you thought that was messy, the next challenge is what some economists call the house-to-house combat of this whole process. I love that phrase. It's all about the problem of quality. Think about it. An iPhone today is not even remotely the same thing as an iPhone from 10 years ago. It's way better. So if the price is higher, how much of that is inflation and how much is you just getting a better product? How do you possibly account for that? Well, the statisticians have a bunch of tricks up their sleeve for this. They have these different methods. They can try to break a phone down into its parts, memory, screen quality, camera, and put a price tag on each little improvement. Or they might look at a similar product, guess the price change. But you can see, right, this is all estimation. It's all judgment. I mean, how much is a slightly better camera really worth to you? There's no easy answer. All right, so we have talked about what to measure and how to deal with quality. But the final piece of this whole puzzle is aggregation. That's a fancy word for how do you add everything up into one single number. And this is where a huge, and I mean huge, value judgment comes into play. This quote just says it all. The way we calculate CPI right now is what you'd call plutocratic. Basically, it's governed by wealth. It weights things based on how much money is spent on them in total. So if rich people spend a ton of money on, say, business class flights, then the price of those flights has a much bigger impact on the final inflation number. But what if you did it differently? You could have a democratic index, where every single household spending gets one vote, an equal weight. The spending habits of a billionaire would count the same as the spending habits of a janitor. Now, here's the kicker. Neither one of these is technically wrong, but they are built on completely different values about who should matter most, and they would absolutely give you different numbers for inflation. So look, we've gone really deep on the CPI, but what this really shows us is a much bigger point. This whole mix of facts and choices and values, it's not just an inflation thing. It's pretty much a feature of every single major economic number we use every day. Just think about unemployment for a second. That main number you hear about, it doesn't even count people who've given up and stopped looking for a job. Is that really the whole story of the job market? It's a choice to leave them out. Or what about GDP? It's supposed to be this grand measure of our economy, but it totally ignores all the unpaid work people do, like taking care of their kids or parents. And it counts $1 million spent cleaning up an oil spill as the exact same good as $1 million spent on building a school. Every single one of these numbers is built on definitions, on choices that literally shape the reality that number ends up showing us. So here's the big takeaway from all this. These economic numbers, they aren't perfect mirrors reflecting reality back at us. They're not. What they are is powerful and, yeah, really important tools. But they are tools built by people. And at every single step of the way, from what you decide to measure in the first place to how you decide to add it all up, someone had to make a choice. And that leaves us with this one last thought to chew on. An economic number isn't just a fact. It's a story. It's a narrative that's shaped by all those little choices we just talked about. So the next time you see one of those big, bold numbers in a headline, just take a second and ask yourself, what choices went into making this number? And whose story is it really telling?